Okay, so here we are on the Green Tongue podcast, and I haven't actually come up with a name for it. So I'm just going to keep saying that every time I start a podcast. I'm just going to call it the Green Tongue podcast, yet to be named. This one we're going to do maybe is episode 3, and we're going to do a video, obviously, and we have a guest this time, Kelsey from Kelsey's Caravans. She's someone who I've kind of looked up to in terms of like how she's been getting out there and making herself seen and the product that she's providing for everybody. So I'm excited to have her on. I got lots of questions for her. I want to know about a few things. She knows what those are, but the first thing we want to know, obviously, Kelsey, is who you are and what got you into being a paddling guide. What kind of guiding you're doing, what your background is, why you chose paddling as a guiding thing, and also entrepreneurship. How's that going, and how are you doing it? So.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Pretty pumped to kind of talk about what I do. So first of all, I'm Kelsey Baldwin. I run Kelsey's Caravan Water Adventures. I'm the owner and main guide, and I offer beginner-friendly, introductory-friendly rafting and paddleboard experiences in the Bow Valley and in Kananaskis country. So I'm a Paddle Canada instructor, and I offer basic through River One Paddle Canada courses, as well as run guided mountain lake sup adventures and guided rafting trips on the Bow River from Ghost Lake Dam down to Cochrane here in Alberta. So that's kind of my little business in a nutshell. My whole premise is creating beginner-friendly and introductory-friendly programming for folks so that, you don't have to be a Red Bull-sponsored athlete to get outdoors. You don't have to have all of the high-end, most current equipment. Anybody and everybody should be able to access the outdoors, but not everybody necessarily knows where or how to start, or they don't have friends in that, field that they want to get into. So I created Kelsey's Caravan as a way to kind of bridge that gap between how do I get outside and starting to do adventures on your own. So giving people a little bit of an entry into being outdoors, doing it safely, learning, the basic tips and tricks of how to paddleboard outdoors in a safe and fun way. And then, that hopefully sets people up for their own, future journey of getting outdoors and doing their own adventures and experiences.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for doing that. Thanks for bringing that to people who are otherwise less, I guess, it's less accessible to them. Obviously, that's a big challenge for the water environment. Not everybody is that comfortable with getting in the cold, rocky, wavy water that we have around here in Alberta. So, yeah, like, what's the biggest challenge that you feel for some of your clients when you're getting them on the water for the first time? One thing that I would love to do is try and get more, I guess, new Canadians and that kind of thing, like get those folks out there. But there's a huge entry barrier, I think, culturally, and I'm struggling to find the time and energy to put that forward. So I'm interested in what you're doing to get people who are otherwise less capable out there.
Yeah, I don't know that I have any particular avenues that I go down or any specific formatting or algorithms that I follow to kind of encourage folks to come outside. I really just believe that it's hard to get into a sport that is as intimidating as whitewater can be, or even slow moving, class 1 environments. A lot of times people just don't know what they don't know. So they put themselves in a scary situation just because of ignorance. And I talk about that with people, and I bring up different scenarios that are really relatable, like floating a explorer dinghy down the river and getting stuck on a tree, or having a friend of a friend that takes a group down for a float and it turns into we got stranded on a sandbar and had to be rescued. All of these scenarios people can kind of relate to, and I talk about them with people who book with me. And I think the fact that I bring these scenarios up and they are relatable to folks, that spreads through the community. Friends tell their friends, and I kind of approach people where they're at and what their experience level is, whether it's they've never touched a paddle in their life, or they've paddled and they just bought their own paddleboard and they've gone out a couple times, but maybe they fell off and got scared, so they want to learn the proper way of doing things. There's a lot of different scenarios that happen to beginners that I think we can all relate to, and I remember being there at that stage, right? So I think the more that you can kind of make the person feel like you understand what they're going through, I I think that gets around, that comes across really quickly, and they want to be around you because they know that you understand. So I think if there is like a way, like an algorithm that I follow, I guess algorithm, it's just trying to be as relatable as possible and finding those different scenarios that speaks to people, I guess. So I
Yeah.
think
So
I've had some good success with that because there aren't a lot of places in the Bow Valley where beginners can go and not spend a ton of money on a course, not spend a ton of money on equipment. It just gets their foot in the door, so to speak, gets their toes wet for the first time in a way that's digestible for them. It's educational, but it's also fun. So there isn't a lot of that kind of around here. And that's kind of where I wanted to go with the business
that's
was, yeah,
that's where you
getting
want to
into that
step in.
little
Yeah.
area.
Yeah, yeah, I get that brought up a couple different scenarios in my head, and I think from my experience, getting people at their level is kind of like the number one way to kind of get people's comfort level up, especially when they're really uncomfortable. I've had numerous clients who, as couples have come in the canoeing world, they want to prepare for a big Nahani trip, or they just want to learn how to paddle with their kids and that kind of thing. And one of the counterparts is just not. And, you have to start from the very smallest bits, like maybe just wading into the water and getting them to float, I try and have dry suits for everybody, but just getting that a little bit of baby step comfort zones introduced and that can be really important. And it's a story that comes to mind is like when I was learning to be a paramedic, I was working in Calgary, and my preceptor just got a canoe, and he was like, "Hey man, where do I go? Like, where should I take my wife and my dog?" And I didn't obviously see him where he was at, because I was just like, "Oh, check out, goes to Cochrane. It's such a great trip. Give it a whirl. Like, these are the logistics, and it should be pretty straightforward. You just got to watch out for some waves." And guess what? They ended up swamping, and they recovered their boat, but they were stranded on the island there, and had to be picked up by the Cochrane Fire Department, which is very embarrassing for him because he knew everybody on the fire department. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, he was kind of pissed at me for that because I didn't really meet him where he was at with that information. That was, a long time ago. But you just have to understand where folks are, and not take anything for granted a lot of times, especially with the beginners for sure.
Yeah, and the more that, like, just to kind of add to that too, the more that we are in these sports, the more experience that we get, I find there's some folks who, I mean, we collectively as whitewater paddlers, the better that we get and the more experience we get, I find there is a little bit of loss there of how we felt when we first started, because now we're super stoked that we're running class 4, class 5, and there's a little bit of like, you should be able to make that, enter, exit, Eddie, no problem, or like the expectation for beginners kind of levels up as your skill set levels up. And I feel that there's a little bit of lack of instructors out there who are able to meet people where they're at, to beat that phrase to death here, just because their experience level is so much higher than it ever used to be.
Yeah.
Meeting people where they're at as a beginner is a little bit harder to relate to, the better you
Yeah.
get as a paddler yourself.
Yeah, and it's tough as a guy because you're in it for the excitement of being out there and enjoying the sport, and you have to like babysit people a little bit
Yeah.
across an eddy line or through you know, a turn, just living on flat water. So you have to find the other connection to the sport there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of is a good dovetail into something else, and that's basically what do you get out of guiding? Like, what draws you to it? And I know I know what I'm looking for. I think I'm gonna hear it. But what do you enjoy about guiding the most? Is it being out on the water? Is it doing the trips that you want to do? Is it the excitement of in your business, running your own business, and trying to see where you can get with that, or what is it that's got you going there?
I mean, honestly, all of the above. But if I had to pick kind of one thing that rises far and above everything else, it's seeing people click with something that you're teaching and seeing that love for that sport that they wanted to try, like, actually blossom because now they understand the fundamentals, right? They understand they just saw how the current moves with the edge of their board. So they're like, oh, I need to position my body like this to negate that. Or like, oh, this is why I should have my paddle on this side of my boat, not this side. It's seeing that moment that people kind of recognize like, oh, I can do this. It's not rocket science. It just takes a little bit of commitment and a little bit of practice and a forgiving instructor, I would say. Someone who's going to kind of be there encouraging them. So for me, being able to encourage somebody to try those moves that are maybe a little bit tricky for them and to practice it. And then you see that light bulb moment go off in their eyes and they're like, yes, they get super stoked. They get fired up because it's, a move they've been practicing for 20 minutes and they just finally got it. And now they're like, oh, okay, their confidence just skyrockets. And, we go in the river and paddle, like you paddle your canoe and I'm in my kayak, and like we hit the river for all sorts of reasons, right? To enjoy the places we get to see and, challenge ourselves a bit and, build camaraderie with other paddlers. So when I see people have that spark go off and they understand what they're doing and they feel safe about it and confident about it, and then I'm like, yes, another person is joining our little world of beauty and fun, and they can enjoy the river now too with us because they feel stoked and confident in what they're doing.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
like the driving force of what I do.
Yeah. And empowerment, that empowerment piece it's big, right? And that really helps you actually see authentic sides of people coming out for sure. Especially when you have like a group of new folks that don't really know each other, or if you put them in a space that they're not comfortable, then they get kind of reserved and they're stuck in their shell. But once that empowerment comes and there's excitement, then you see that extreme breakout from their personality. It's pretty cool to watch. Yeah, I'd have to say it's like all those things that we just talked about for sure. That's what I look forward to in my my day-to-days out there, is connecting with people and just seeing how at what level we can accomplish things for sure. So what's your take on entrepreneurship and running your own business? How's that going?
Honestly, it's pretty great. Making my own schedule and
Yeah.
booking things when and how I want to, and creating programming that I would have wanted when I first started out. That's been huge, just trying to really think back to who I was when I was in my early 20s, just starting in the sport and developing things that I would have wanted to see back then that I just couldn't find. It's been really great. Like, I've been super fortunate to grow up in a family of entrepreneurs. My dad and my stepmom have created a business that I still work for. Our family runs a raw pet food company. So that was from the ground up. I've watched my parents kind of start that from, very basics of when I was in my teens to now. And like, that's been a couple decades of them being entrepreneurs and seeing how rewarding it can be when you get it right. And the feedback that you get when you get it right, that's been, I don't know, a pretty good thing to watch on my end. And it's helped me, I guess, run this business in a way that receives feedback from people to make it better. And then also, fixes things that are critiqued, and just, again, like that relatable aspect. Like you can't be an entrepreneur and grow if you're not willing to accept criticism and, pivot or change your attitude or change what you're offering based on the feedback you're getting. It's the fastest way to shut yourself down is to not pivot and change when, the times demand it. So I think being an entrepreneur has been really cool in that regard, just seeing what people actually want versus what I think they want and how that kind of blends together. Yeah, I love it. Honestly, it's been super rewarding and one of the most fun things that I've done because I get to be on the river 9 times out of 10. Sometimes we're doing some dry land training or whatever, but I get to be on the water in the sun and sharing what I love with people. It's been pretty cool.
Do you think you would keep it up if things got so busy that you had to just focus on running the business and you had to like hire guides to do all the work for you and you ended up in the office?
I think I'm lucky that I'm in a position where I don't want to get big enough that I have 10 guides under me and I'm running, 50 trips a year kind of thing. I don't want to be a conglomerate, I guess. I don't want to have 50 people on the river at once and nobody knows your name. You're just another person in a boat. I don't want, there's a couple of rafting companies out here who like that's their bread and butter. You run 20 boats a day, every day, 7 days a week. That's not the vibe I'm going for, honestly. I like things being small. I like things being intimate. I like getting to know the people that are coming on trips with me. And I think people who come on trips with me appreciate that aspect of it, right? Like, I don't want folks to just be another number in my reports. I want them to feel like there's some intention behind what I offer and for them to be a part of that. That's the whole reason I do what I do, is to have them be a part of what I'm trying to offer really intentionally and really personally. So I'm looking at maybe hiring a raft guide for next summer, because there have been opportunities where there's a day where I want to run a raft trip, but I've also had 2 paddleboard trips booked already, so I can't be in both places at once. So I would like to be able to offer my services more than I have been, but if that means hiring one guide, great. I don't want to have a whole fleet of people in boats running every day, 7 days a week for the whole summer. That's just not
Right.
something that I'm aspiring to.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it seems that way. You're very much connected to the product, so that's what's special about you for sure. Yeah, yeah, totally. I think that you care about that connection, and like you said, watching people be who they be, and it's not so much about an ego-driven thing for you. So that's so important out there for sure, and especially when you have like the demographic that you're targeting, and it's for lack of a better word, I think you are targeting, and it's the female population for sure. Um, uh, I being a Gen Xer, sometimes I have trouble with what's okay to talk about, and I'm not going to get too far into genders, but I know that obviously the ladies like to have other ladies out there working with them, and they want the feedback that's specific for them, and sometimes it can be really intimidating for if there's always men kind of running things for sure, and they're with their high skill level, or they're not necessarily relating to the sensitivities that come with being who you are. So yeah, what's it like being a female in the guiding industry, maybe? And I hire a lot of female guides for sure, and I think there's a lot of female guides out there. But I think for the most part, a lot of the businesses are kind of run and owned by male for sure. So what's it like being out there, kind of on your own?
Um, I mean, I won't say it's been 100% butterflies and rainbows, but I think I'm pretty lucky in the sense that I grew up in a way, like I grew up on a farm, and every person had to pull their weight regardless of gender, right? If you weren't pulling your weight, doing chores, feeding animals, maintaining property, then bills weren't getting paid, you weren't getting fed, animals weren't getting cared for. So everyone, regardless if they were male or female, the expectations were the same. And I think growing up in that kind of environment has helped me kind of create this business, in the sense that I just am confident and can put my foot in the door where maybe I've seen other women not feel comfortable to do that, because I've always just been told, like, you got to get your shit done. Didn't matter that I was a chick, right? Or a daughter or a niece or whatever. I grew up playing on male hockey teams and co-ed baseball teams, and it's just everyone is deadpan the same. You got to pull your weight. Doesn't matter who you are. I think I was really lucky to grow up in an environment like that, and I recognized later in my life than I like to admit that not all women grew up with that experience. And again, that coming back to that whole relatable thing, just trying to recognize that not all women have friendly men in their life. They didn't have positive male experiences growing up. Some people have had traumatic experiences, and I really, in my mid-20s, just kind of recognized that, oh, not everybody can put their foot in the door like I can, because there have been things that have happened that have absolutely traumatized them, and they cannot get that foot in the door. So somebody like me who can help them do that, that's all I want. And that's also been, part of the driving force of getting these women on the water specific programs going up, is to just make sure that that door is open for those people who don't feel like they can get their foot in the door themselves. Because it's a very real and very scary aspect of the outdoor industry, is how many men there are, and not all of them are nice. Most of them I've been fortunate to, run into have been pretty stellar human beings like yourself. But that's not the case for everybody. And it's just kind of pushed me to really try and open that door. I'm going to keep saying that phrase over and over again, I feel like, but it's really helped push me to push that door open for other women who maybe just don't have that positivity kind of in their environment that they're at.
Right. Yeah.
I
More
hope that answered
empowerment
your
there. Hey.
question.
Yeah. No, totally. So yeah, you do see those challenges for sure as a female in the guiding industry, right? And that's definitely, I think, something that we hear a lot of. Would you say that there's any benefits from being a female out there, whichever way you want to go with it? I mean, I would say that, as a female, it gives you the ability to connect with 50% of the clientele on a different level. And then it also, helps you understand them, and it makes you more relatable, overall. I think ladies out there in leadership positions are way more relatable than a lot of guys. So a lot of guys will come out there with like this need to show themselves off as the expert or something, maybe even faking it till they make it sort of thing, which is something I tell all the guys that work for me. It's like, you got to fake it till you make it. Not that we're going outside of our skill zone or anything, but it's that connection piece with people, and how to relate to them. Yeah. So I think that's a huge benefit for women in the industry. Anything else there for you that you've found, that's been surprising, or that you lean on a little bit, or anything like that when you're out there with your clients?
Yeah, I think a benefit is just having that different perspective. As you said, there's a lot of ego when it comes to safety and skill sets in the outdoors for women and men, but you can generalize to an extent how men teach things and how they display things and what their expectations are of somebody they're teaching versus what women do, right? We teach just in a different way because we are, physically smaller in most cases. We have other bigger, larger personalities around us that we're trying to mitigate and trying to talk through and talk with. So whether it's, teaching swiftwater or demonstrating a paddle stroke or, what's your foot positioning, I think the way that I bring things across when it comes to instructing is a little bit different than what men do, just because, my physicality is different and I have to think of 5, 6, 7 different ways to present information. Whereas a lot of men, when they're talking to other men, kind of muscle through it, introduce it 1 or 2 ways, they pick it up, boom, you're done, right? There's a lot of stuff going on in our brains as women when we're on the water in a male and female dynamic. We're trying to think of, what can I say next? Is that going to sound dumb? Is what I do relevant? Is what I do correct? Like there's a lot more, I guess, personal inflection versus output when it comes to being, a woman in a environment like that, or a scenario where there's, men and women involved. So yeah, benefit for me is just being able to display these different skills or scenarios in a way that's more comfortable, I guess, and isn't just, done 1 or 2 different ways and then that's it, expectations over. It's kind of, I work at it until I see it go off, and I feel like a lot of women, appreciate that, because 1 or 2 ways doesn't always work for them. And maybe not even just women in specific, but people with accessibility or disability issues. You want to think of shoulder mobility, or maybe they had a hip replacement, or they broke their knee playing ball when they were 20. There's a lot of different ways that you can present information that not, I would say, all men, some of them do, but not all men think about, I guess, in big picture of things. So I don't mean that as an offense on you. It's just something that I've kind of noticed, because you do, like I said before, as you get more experienced in your craft and in your skill set, you just kind of stick with the 1 or 2 things that work for the majority of your demographic, and then you don't really expand outside of that. Yeah, that's just kind of something that I've noticed that is a benefit.
Yeah. No offense taken. Don't worry. It's all good. It's all good. So yeah, um, that's a lot of the stuff that I want to know, but there's a couple other things that I'm hoping to grill you on for sure.
Uh-oh.
One thing, yeah, you don't have to answer this, but I'm interested. Is this is Kelsey's Caravan? Is it sustaining you? Like, you have? Is this like your full time thing in the summer, or are you doing
No,
something else? It's your
no,
side gig, or do
it's
you have a
definitely
side gig
more,
to it?
like half time, I would say. My full-time stuff is working for my family, selling frozen raw pet food for our business.
Okay.
If it wasn't for that business,
Yeah.
Kelsey's Caravan probably wouldn't exist, if I'm being honest, or it would
Right.
be years behind where it is now. All the
Yeah.
money that I make from that business goes straight into Kelsey's Caravan, basically to pay for my insurance, pay for my permitting, pay for my recertifications, and to keep everything running and going. Last year, I think, was the first year that I actually made profits on Kelsey's Caravan, honestly. And that's, from what I hear as an entrepreneur, like that's kind of to be expected. You should expect loss in your first couple of years and not to start making money after like 4 or 5 years. So that's pretty on par with what they say, whoever they are. But yeah, it's not full time. I run basically May through September, and I'm, as I get the name out there and the brand out there and I kind of get more recognized, I'm looking at ways to keep things going year round. Like this winter, going to Ecuador for guided paddleboard trips. That's brand new as of this winter, and I'm hoping to keep rolling for winters to come. So yeah, I'm looking to make it more full time, but as of right now, and since I started, it's been definitely part time or half time.
Okay, tell us more about Ecuador. How many days?
So the one that we're running now is an 11-day all-inclusive paddleboard package. So we're running, I think, 7 different rivers on our paddleboards. Again, running on the beginner introductory theme. So people have to have at least their Paddle Canada River 1 sub-skill certification to go on this trip. And I wanted to keep that standard just so that I know that people have the same set of lingo and they understand river terminology and they know, like, we're all on the same page when we get down there. Instructors have their own different ways of putting their spins on stuff and their own little unique ways of teaching. But at least if I know that they have that River 1 certification, they've been taught the same stuff across the board. So
you're telling me that if I want to go on this trip and I've been paddling down the river for like the last 2 years and I've got some basic skills, but I don't have that Paddle Canada cert, that you're not going to take my money?
So it is that or equivalent skill set.
Yeah. Okay.
But that is a good question because we haven't had much of that this year. I've been thankful that every person who's booked on this trip for this winter, we have a group of 5 coming down. One of them I taught myself, or 2 of them I taught myself, this summer. And one of them, she went from never touching a paddle in her life all the way to taking her River 1 skills. So we worked together over 6 different courses and sessions this summer to get her up to where she felt comfortable to book this Ecuador trip. So yeah, I do have a pretty hard stop at the River 1 skills or equivalent. And that's where that personal connection comes in. If you reach out to me like, hey, I haven't taken the course, but I've been a riverboarder for 20 years. I've paddled these rivers. I've been on the Kootenay. I've done the Canada bunch on my paddleboard. Like, if we can have those conversations and you can show me that your skill set is equivalent, then yeah, of course, like I'd love to have you join. But that's where that personal connection definitely comes into play. I'm not just going to blindly trust you saying that you're good to go, and then all of a sudden we're in Ecuador and you're compromising the rest of my group.
Yeah, we've been there before.
Yes.
Yeah, we've all been there, I think. So what's your plan for 5 years? Like, you're hoping to maybe do a couple of these trips every year and then have a sustainable business that, basically you fill up your trips every summer, and are you hoping that it's going to be that you're going to be kind of like sustained full time, or are you going to stick with the raw food business? Have you been looking at that?
The guiding business can kind of sustain itself in a way that it, I guess, not just pays for my bills, but like the end goal with the guiding business is to eventually create an adventure hostel as well. So most of the money that's coming in from that has gone back into the business to like upgrade my equipment, buy more paddle boards, buy better life jackets, more wetsuits, stuff like that. So it's a lot of it's been turnover of equipment and upgrades in the system, changing over my website, stuff like that, just to get to the point where it can run by itself as seamlessly as possible. So the next 5 years, my goal is to purchase land and a couple more tiny homes. I'm in a tiny house right now that I've been in for 3 years. It's my home, but my goal is to have a couple more tiny houses situated in a way that it's an adventure hostel. So shared accommodation, proper hostel accommodation in the Bow Valley. So my goal is to have a adventure hostel where you can stay affordably and play affordably. Is kind of my little, I don't know, dream in a nutshell. If people want to book a rafting package and then a paddleboard package the next day, they can do that all with me on site and also have somewhere to sleep. So that's kind of where I'm coming at it with that as well. Or if people, are visiting from across Canada and they bring their own mountain bikes or they bring their own kayaks, and they can book a hostel stay with me and then they can just do their own adventuring on their own. But again, I'm noticing that there is nowhere that you can stay in the Bow Valley for under $100 a night. Even the hostels in Canmore or, up the Parkway, it's like $75 per person for a room with 8 other people. So I really want to bring that, backpackers, travelers, hostel vibe back to the area.
Nice. That's pretty sweet vision. I like that. Bringing that vibe back for sure. Like kind of going back to the grassroots. So
Nice,
good.
yeah. I mean, whenever I travel, I want to spend my money on things to do, not places to sleep, right? So, like, I'm
Yeah.
going to save my cash and go on experiences and just sleep wherever I'm sleeping for 7 hours a night and continue adventuring the next day. So,
Yeah.
there's nowhere you can do that here that's affordable.
Oh, it's getting harder everywhere, man. Everywhere. Right? Like anywhere you go travel. You got any stories? Like any what would be the scariest thing that happened to you as a guide? Like the thing that something that maybe asked that you had to ask yourself if you want to keep going on it, going with it. Some in the moment maybe you're concerned about your own safety or the safety of your clients. I mean, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here or anything, but when I'm training guides, either as in first aid or saltwater rescue or as guides in guide courses, it's something that I bring up. I'm like, hey, like you're going to have to manage these situations, and you're also going to have to manage these feelings. Like, and part of that comes down to the PTSD side of things. Now, you're not really working in extreme environments, so to speak, but we are taking, again, folks that are new to the environment and putting them in these situations. In my career, a handful of times where I was like, "Is this really right for me? Did I do the right thing for this person?" That kind of thing. Do you got any stories you're comfortable speaking of, and how you manage them, and then also like if you had any sort of revelations and how you dealt with the challenges that came with the stress, like the PTSD side. You know what I mean? Like how you processed all that stress afterwards or during.
Yeah. I think with I have a couple from personal kayaking experiences when it comes to kind of traumatic events and incidences and dealing with the aftermath of injury and scenarios. But for guiding in particular, there was one trip that I did. It was my second year running these raft trips on the Bow River from Ghost Lake Dam down to Cochrane. And we stopped I call it Wildcat Ledge. I don't know what everybody else calls it, if it even has a rapid name, but it's that kind of like 20-foot wide river ledge right at the gas plant. Basically, it's where you can put on or take off as well if you're a paddler. But I always crash through that wave, and then we stop in the Big Eddy, and then we go and look at the feature, take some photos with it or whatever. And there was one day, my second year running trips, that me and this family of 4 that I was with, and we're standing on that ledge and we were taking photos. Like, we were well back from the ledge itself, so no one was in any risk of falling down. But as we were taking photos there and I was talking about what the feature is, there was this husband and wife floating down the river, no life jackets. Each of them had a cooler of beer. They were in their own little black inner tubes, just in their bathing suits. And that's very common on this river, just people floating down, having a good time. But I don't know if maybe it was their first time on this section of river, because a lot of folks who do move to Cochrane float this river for the first time and have their own experiences. But this couple in particular, the husband was floating just ahead of the wife. And I don't think they saw that the ledge was coming up, and it kind of makes this little recirculating hole at certain levels. And the husband was coming up first. He was like 40 feet ahead of his wife on his own tube. And he noticed all these waves and freaked out, started trying to paddle with his arms to get to shore, but he was using his arms to go to river left, which just puts you into like this cliff face and nothing else. He falls off his inner tube and then goes under the rock, under this sieve or undercut, however you want to call it. That makes up the ledge. There's this kind of undercut, like rock outcropping, and then the 10-foot ledge that makes the recirculating wave. And he goes under this rock and then he disappears. Pops up 10 feet later, but he got some pretty serious downtime for like 6 or 7 seconds. And I'm standing with this family and I'm like, just, I've got my throw bag out ready. I'm watching what's going on because he was coming up pretty fast. And then his wife starts freaking out. She manages to paddle herself away to the other side of the shoreline and misses where he went under. But like, I had to jump in, get his inner tube, collect all his garbage, swim all that stuff back to shore. He managed to swim himself into the big eddy and into shore. And that was just an experience that I'm like, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I don't want anybody in this family to ever do this on their own. Like,
yeah.
I don't ever want to see this happen again, because the
Yeah.
kids that I was with and this family that had booked this trip with me were freaking out.
Yeah.
And they're like, is he okay? Is he going to be all right? They were 7 and 8 years old.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, he's going to be okay. But, this is why we always wear life jackets. This is why we learn a little bit about the river that we're going on so that we can know what hazards are and how to avoid them. So it just segued into a really good learning opportunity that could have ended, if there was a tree under that sieve, like it could have been a body recovery, right? So it's just stuff like that that really makes me, like, that kind of changed how I talk about the river too. So I do incorporate a bit more education on my raft trips. Most raft trips are just kind of a floating, fun, hang out, look at the scenery. But now I purposefully talk about that scenario at that ledge, what undercuts look like, what sieves look like, and why they're dangerous. I always bring it up now just because people don't know what they don't know, right? And man clearly also didn't. So,
yeah. So, any in the kayaking world, did you have a couple bad swims at times, or you cited those 2 ones? I'm going to push you a little bit here, but how'd that work for you?
Yeah, I don't mean being pushed, man. Ask the hard questions. I don't care.
Yeah. Okay.
I haven't had any bad swims, thankfully. I did have a pretty shitty experience on the Elbow River at flood. We went from the falls down to Patty's. Well, we're supposed to go down from the falls to Patty's Flats, and there's a rapid on this river called the Slide. And we were at flood, so I wanted to avoid going through Hero Hole, which is a river right feature that is kind of an entry feature to the Slide, which is a class 4 rapid. I wanted to avoid that, so me and 2 members of our group went river left instead, which is a notoriously shitty, manky, sharp, rocky, ledgy kind of section. That's also an entry feature into the Slide, but you never take it because it's so manky. We just decided to do it this day because Hero Hole looked really, really trashy and sticky, and we thought because of flood levels, we could sneak by on river left and do the Slide that way. I ended up going upside down, smashed my head on a bunch of rocks, and I sliced open my hand, and I got 13 stitches on my middle finger. And that was in May at the very start of my guiding season. So ended up going upside down.
You walking around like this everywhere?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, in the splint.
I've got
Yeah.
a pretty wicked scar on it, but
Yeah.
that was a bad decision on my part because I kind of set the start of my season up with an injury. So I had to reschedule a bunch of different clinics that I had booked, and I had to cancel a couple of trips that I was guiding because I had freaking stitches in my hand and I couldn't get it wet and all this stuff.
So bad decision because you feel that maybe it was outside of your skill level, or?
At that time, I think so. Yeah, because, running anything at flood is a risk. And I just kind of went into it a little bit more confidently than I should have. I should have just walked it. I never paddled that section with the 3 people that I was with.
Yeah.
Either. So a brand new group. I paddled with them on other rivers and I knew them very well, but this was our first time as a group on this section together. I'd never run this river at these levels before in our lives. And there's a very easy, very simple portage around this feature. And, hindsight's 2020. There's a fine line of pushing yourself and challenging yourself, but also maybe I should have done that not a week before my guiding season starts, and then set myself up for a whole bunch of different challenges. And then after that, it took me 4 years to run that section of river again.
Right.
Because I would just approach that rapid and my body would just have shakes. I would tear up. I would start just I just went into this physical response of don't go near this fucking feature because it's going to kill you kind of thing. Think about it all the time. If I hadn't rolled up after I had my fight with the bottom of the river and sliced my hand open, if I got knocked unconscious there, I would have died. I would have gone down the slide entirely upside down and I would have died,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a lot of stuff like that affected my personal kind of paddling experience for a couple years, but not so much the guiding, I guess. The guiding, because like you said, a lot of what I do is introductory, beginner friendly stuff. All
Yeah.
is well within my wheelhouse. And I didn't really have many, responses to anything that happened in the guiding world that like I do
Yeah.
in my personal kayaking world.
Yeah. I find that in my personal experience is like, it's been a long time since I've run anything that's like over a 3+. It's just because of family life and I'm trying to be a little bit vigilant about being healthy. But it's like I don't necessarily have the same hypervigilance I have about myself that I have about others that I would have about myself. Right. So if I was paddling with a group of friends, I probably would take more chances. And I would probably be prepared to do more with less preparedness, if that makes sense. Whereas, like, even with my family, my wife and I kind of got in a bit of a tip last year where we decided we're going to do the Kootenai but in canoes instead of, we usually take the family down a raft, took them down in canoes. And it was late August and we were bringing some friends that had actually done a course with me, but they were friends, and it was a mother and daughter combo. And I was like, well, everyone should just wear dry suits, like it just makes sense, but it was supposed to be like a 30-degree weekend. And, Lindsay's, why are you being so militant? She got kind of upset about the prospect of me trying to force people to wear dry suits. And my idea was that even if a swim happens in the wrong place, it just would take so much away from everyone else's energy. And sometimes rescues just go long, even when it's low water. But I don't think I would have that same sense of hypervigilance in terms of like if I'm paddling with a bunch of friends casually, that's that whole heuristic thing that, we try to kind of touch on sometimes with guide school, right? Is you have to kind of check yourself a little bit. And now I think from what it sounds like is that you've had to work through a level of trauma there, kind of approaching this site and dealing with the emotion, dealing with how your body reacts, and you eventually have gone through it, right? And that's kind of like how all that stuff is processed. Is like you have to go through it, you can't avoid it, and that's one of the hardest things. In EMS we talk about our calls and we use black humor to deal with it, but we have to, right? We have to talk about all of our calls because they are stressful. Not all of them are stressful, but some of them are. And we'll use a little bit of black humor to kind of, go through the details of it, and we have to process it by, reenacting it repeatedly. So, that's one thing that I think that all adventure paddlers, all adventurists, like anyone like getting into adventure sports, you have to the reason why it's called adventure sports is because you're putting yourself out on the pointy end, and there's a chance that we have all these things that are set up for our safety, but there's always a chance that they could fail. It's not like, well, I mean, hockey's a little bit different, but like playing soccer or baseball, chances of really getting hurt will mostly come from like driving to the event, where same for climbing and paddling and etc. But I mean, we're still putting ourselves out there, and we still kind of are on the edge sometimes about our own safety. So yeah, it sounds like you forced yourself to work through that a little bit, and it's affected you in way. Hey, lost you.
Sorry, yeah, I totally lost you on the screen there, but it still says it's recording. Sorry about that.
Yeah, good. Okay. Yeah, anyways, I was just kind of rambling about processing PTSD. Anyways, it's part of that adventure thing.
I look at it too, like if you spend enough time outside, statistically something's going to happen. So the more that you keep going down your own personal journeys of whatever sport it is, climbing, paddleboarding, kayaking, canoeing, whatever it is, paragliding, who cares? statistically, the more you do it, the higher chance you're going to have something bad happen. So I think it's really important to face your fears if you want to continue doing your sport, right? There's a reason why most people who hit the class 5 river level only do it for X amount of seasons and they bump back down to enjoying fun, chill class 3, class 4 stuff, or like even class 2, because you can only put your body through so much stress every single time you go out before it starts to wear on you, right? And you can either have, personal mantras in place and personal systems in place to mitigate those responses to that scary environment, or you just take yourself out of the environment and, keep things more chill for yourself. It all depends on what you want out of the sport. And that's, again, something that I really try to talk to people about if they book something with me. It's like, the safer you are, the more rad shit you can do. That's like one of the things that I say every time. So if you can, mitigate as much as you can, check all the boxes, be as safe as possible, something still might happen, but at least you're prepared for it. So I don't know. That's just part of being out in the Rocky Mountains or out in nature, kind of anywhere. Something's going to happen at some point. So the better prepared you are, the better off you're going to be, and the more likelihood of you continuing your sport because you were prepared.
Right. Yeah. Understanding what can happen will help you deal with it when it does happen a little bit better, for sure. I just have a couple more things that, like the previous podcast that I recorded, I was just talking nonsense about like types of stroke, because I find I'm often in conflict with my own personal kind of concepts or understanding of like the dynamics of how a paddle stroke will move a boat and versus what we're taught. And I'm really interested to know a little bit more about stand-up paddleboarding. I stand-up paddleboard, and I have messed around with a few different things, but this is really basic stuff. But I mean, what are the main strokes you guys are teaching in the stand-up paddleboard? Like obviously just forward strokes, right? But and then sweep strokes.
No, that's a good question. The integral ones that I would say when you're starting out paddleboarding to learn is your forward stroke, like an efficient forward stroke, a sweep stroke,
Yeah.
and your draw stroke. I mean, those three, honestly, if you can perfect those, then everything else will be a little bit easier, and you're still going to maneuver yourself down the water, down the river in a safe way, efficiently.
So what's the hardest stroke to teach and the most important stroke to teach? They don't have to be the same.
The hardest stroke for me to teach is the cross draw stroke.
Okay.
And it doesn't really come into play that often on the river unless you're looking to push that class 3 river running kind of grade. I find you don't really need it, but it is just another tool to have in your tool belt of skills, right? That's definitely the hardest one to teach because it is awkward. Your board is, at least 32 to 36 inches wide, and you're making your body cross over in a way that's not natural. And you're working against the current on the backside of your hand that doesn't feel great. So that one's hard to teach because it doesn't feel very nice unless you really practice it, spend hours and hours and hours dialing it in certain scenarios on the river. Then the one that is used a lot on the river that I think could be done better is the draw stroke. For paddleboarding, we draw our nose to our paddle blade, and that one takes a lot of core engagement and a lot of core strength, and people that are starting paddleboarding for the first time don't necessarily have that experience yet or those muscles built up yet. They're just getting into it. So it's hard. It's tiring. And getting that stroke dialed in just can feel very frustrating because they're tired. It takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
So.
And some people can't even just stand up. They're so kind of like focused on stabilizing that even just doing a forward stroke's really hard.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. You're trying to not get punted off your board. You're trying to make sure your feet are where they're supposed to be and your knees are bent, and you're standing on this toothpick in the middle of the water, and that's not natural just by itself. So there's just a lot that your brain's trying to digest all at once.
I was hoping you say the forward stroke is the most important.
Oh, man. It's very important. I would say it is very important because you want to be able to get from point A to point B. And there's an argument for that being like, even if all your turning strokes are shit, if you can forward your way towards something, then great. But I would argue that it's just muscling your way through something instead of actually learning how to do something well.
Okay.
Anyone can have a strong forward stroke, whether it's, positioned well or the technique is good, is questionable, but you can always have a strong forward stroke.
Yeah.
If you can't turn your board in the direction you want to go, you can paddle forward as much as you want, but you're not going to get where you want because your board's facing the wrong way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, if your forward stroke's efficient, then you're not going to turn as much. Anyways, what about offside forward? You guys teach that in Paddle Canada, offside forwards on your paddle board?
Get into the River 2 skill sets. For what I do, we don't teach offside forward strokes just because there's just already so much that they're learning in the River 1 course that we really focus on, draw stroke, sweep stroke. Breaking strokes are in there too, forward stroke. Like when it comes to offside forward, that kind of gets more into either a racing platform, if people are wanting to take their paddleboarding into flatwater racing, or River 2 skills. That's not really something that we really focus on for the beginner, the beginner courses or the River 1 course.
So for the most part, just switching sides to control your.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what are you guys using for crossing eddy lines? Like are you doing a power angle tilt? Are you doing
we call it, I call it PAW or P, I guess, power angle weighting or power angle edging. So having control of your edges on your board is really important. For kayakers and canoeists, it's the same thing. You have edges on your boats that if you tip it the wrong way, the current's going to catch it and flip you over. Paddleboarding's the same. Our edges are, anywhere from 4 to 8 inches thick, depending on your board that you're taking on the river. So standard board edges are 6 inches deep or 5 inches. So if you aren't standing on your board correctly and you're weighting one edge too much, and that current's hitting it this way, it's going to do the same thing and, sink that side of your board and flip you off your board. So power going into or out of the eddy, the angle of your board going into or out of the eddy, and then, the edge or the weighting of your board exiting or entering an eddy.
Okay. Yeah, okay. And then when you're teaching that, are you focused more on like the direction the boat is pointing? Are you focused more on like gaining power to cross eddy line? What's the one thing that you think that is the defining factor to success for folks that are just learning how to transition between currents while you're teaching them?
That's a good question because every person I've taught is different. They pick up on a different thing to focus on, and it almost gives me something different each time that I have to combat and unteach for them. So if I bring up power, angle, and edging, they'll focus just on power. So they're paddling as fast as they can, and it's, maybe a flat water class 1 environment. So they'll paddle as fast as they can, but then they'll flip off because their edging is wrong. Or I'll have other people who are so focused on the angle of their board that they're not paddling hard enough to get them across that eddy line and even into the current. And then their nose spins out and they're stuck doing spin-ins on the eddy line. So it's different with every group, I've found, because everyone has their thing that they pick up on. If I had to generalize and think of something that I've noticed more often than not, it's the nervousness around being on a moving current that freaks people out. So they think that if I just paddle past, that'll give me stability. When, working with the water is more often than not your best bet, but that takes experience and that takes time and repetition for them to get a feel of the water. So if there was like a piece of advice I could give out, it would be just slow yourself down a bit. We're in a class 1 environment. I'm here as an instructor to help you. Stress as much, just slow it down. We can always speed it up. We can always go faster and stronger, but we want to bring it down to that fundamental level first so that they can build up from something instead of just like panic paddling because they feel like they're unstable or, need to get across it as fast as they can so they can get back to shore as fast as they can. That's just something that I've kind of noticed with nerves and experience levels across the board.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense for sure. Be patient and try and, I guess, gain the skill hopefully like as you and don't expect to be staying upright.
Yeah. Or be perfect on the first time you try it. Because I'm guilty of wanting to be perfect immediately. And if I'm not, then I feel like I failed. I definitely have that mentality. And I've had students have that mentality too. Of like, oh, I didn't get it my first try. So clearly I suck. And it's like, no, man, like this is your first course ever. And this is your first time on a riverboard ever. Like you got to give yourself some grace to This is why we're in this course, is
Yeah.
for you to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, that reminds me of like, so I train a lot of paramedics as well. Like every year we'll take on 2 paramedics, and I have a reputation, and don't think worse of me. I have a reputation of making some of the students cry. It's a stressful job. And I mean, one discussion I had with one of these prospective paramedics is basically like, hey, you can't think that you're going to be perfect. And only after banging my head against the wall with this person, after some time, I just got frustrated. And I'm like, what makes you think that you're so good that you can't make a mistake? Right? Because we've had this discussion many times, and it was a frustrating, 8 weeks with this person, but eventually they got it. And that's part of it, is just understanding that you have to be okay with failure, and we all know that for sure. Yeah, it's sometimes it's hard for some people to pick up on, um, especially folks that are anticipating doing what they see, but not necessarily understanding what it takes to get there. A lot like kids,
Yeah.
So hey, last question.
Okay.
And then if you want to, I mean, we're close to an hour here, but if you want to, add anything or ask me any questions or whatever, this is the most important question. What is the best paddlecraft? Now, you have to choose your camp, and you got to be staunch about it. Like, well, this is good because of that, or this is good because of, like, hands down, best paddlecraft, and we will judge you accordingly.
Kayaking. Kayak.
Kayaking?
Yeah, creek boat. Creek boat.
Creek boating? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Down. Yeah, you can do anything. You can do anything in a kayak. You can go as fast as you want, slow as you want. You're nimble. You can maneuver. You can, cruise past all the rafts that are slowing you down. If you've got a roll, even better. Like, yeah, kayaking, you're unstoppable. You can go so many places in a kayak that you cannot go in a raft, that you cannot go on a paddleboard, that you probably don't want to go in a C1. Like, kayaking, it's so extreme and it's so fun, and just the higher up you get in the sport, the more the world opens up to you, the more traveling opportunities you get, like the more that you just want to see everything there is to see from the water, because it's just so freaking cool. Like, executing a good move in a class 4 environment feels so rewarding and accomplishing, and you're surrounded by cliff walls or sand dunes. Like, kayaking's hands down the best way to run a river.
You're one with the water. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing better than feeling like you are like a snake or a dragon, just like silky smooth, gliding around rocks, popping out of eddies, like surfing waves. It's just unbeatable, unparalleled feeling. Yeah.
I guess I got to ask this as well, because it's part of the discussion. But it came up last year. There was a rescue performed by a stand-up paddleboarder of a kayaker who was pinned on a tree, and part of the problem was that the kayaker that they were with was, I had to get out of their kayak, carry the boat up, and the paddleboarder just had so much more freedom getting on and off his board, and was able to create a rescue platform. How do you feel about that? Like, what do you think? Would you rather that there was always a paddleboarder with you, if you could choose, like, the best rescue craft? What do you think? In your experience, I mean, it's all relative, of course, but the most stable platform obviously would be something like a raft. But how do you feel about doing, say, a rescue of someone pinned on your paddleboard in a class 3 environment? Do you feel confident with that?
From personal experience, I would say having a paddleboarder for rescue purposes is pretty clutch. They're still not as nimble, and there's still a lot more things that can go wrong, because as soon as they fall off their board, they are a swimmer with a rope in the water, and now maybe they're going to get pinned. Like, there's still always that risk if something were to go wrong. But if everything goes 100% perfect and they're executing a rescue plan, as fast as it can go, like that video you're talking about, you just rock up on your board, pull them out, off you go. That's awesome. I personally have seen when I did the Grand Canyon 2 years ago, we had a really good friend of mine, Kim Canyon, came down on her paddleboard, did the whole thing on herself. Majority of the rapids, I think there was 3 that she didn't do. And she saved swimmers twice. One was in a grade 6 rapid, and it was a different party than ours. The guy just got punted out of the raft because they crashed through this wave and he wasn't expecting it. She charged right up to him on her board, yanked him up by his life jacket, threw him on her board, and paddled him to the raft and just floated next to the raft with him on this nice, floating barge of a paddleboard for him to catch his breath and regroup. And then the rafters could pull him back in a lot easier than if a kayaker had tried to do that, right? With a paddleboard, you can kind of take ownership over the subject. You can kind of put them on your board and paddle with them, and they just kind of sit there. Whereas a kayak, you're actively trying to make sure they're grabbing onto the front of your boat, grabbing the grab handles, talking to them, making sure they're not desperately trying to flip you over and climb up you and stuff like that. So in those aspects, I think there's definitely benefits to have, but it's again, luck of the draw, time and place, depends on the scenario, all those factors.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that was it was an interesting discussion that came up after that, especially after I can't remember her name, the lady that pulled the dog off the race course last year as well.
Jackie.
Yeah, Jackie. Man. Yeah, that was cool to watch on the news, national news of all things.
And again, like a kayak couldn't have done that, not easily and not well.
No,
not right below cartwheel.
Yeah, no. So. Yeah, no, that's cool. All right, well, it's been a blast. Hopefully that pause in recording didn't mess everything up.
I hope so too. It's still been running on my end, like the recording time. So
yeah, well, it's a new recording time, but I think I saw a notification that the other one was automatically recorded. So, but yeah, people don't need to hear about that stuff. Cool. Anything else to say or mention, or anything else you want to plug any more about your business?
About the business, just wanting to let people know that there is an avenue out there if you're a beginner. If you've seen grandparents buy paddleboards and they're paddling on lakes, that's not just what paddleboarding is about. You can take it down some pretty cool river environments or hike them out to some pretty cool alpine lakes if you just have the skill set to do so. So just letting people know that I'm here and other businesses like me do exist, even if they're few and far between. So don't feel like just because you've never touched a paddle in your life doesn't mean you can't get started now. And I guess if I had a question for you, kind of on the vein of female guiding and female instructing, what's been your experience? Because I've seen what I've seen as someone who's taken swiftwater rescue courses, but as someone who is an instructor, do you find that there are less female instructors than there maybe should be? Have you noticed that there's people asking for them, or would it be good to have or not have? Are things pretty good as they are? What's your...
Would it be good to have more ladies out there? I think it seems like there's more. It seems like there's more women in the space, honestly, and I'd like to see more women in leadership. I mean, one person that I can think of right now would be Kelly Beaton with Hunter Valley, and she's actually just maybe the cat's out of the bag or whatever, but she's just kind of like taking over the whole operation now. She's stepping back, and then Lynn, I don't know her last name, Kenya Rafting, and then there's also Rita, who's a force of all of her own. I would like to see more ladies out there in the leadership position. Actually, a girl that's been working closely with me is Michaela Hoots, who's she's the river manager for Canadian Rockies Rafting. I think there's so much strength in having a diverse level of demographic in guiding, and I am always happy to bring in women, and would even choose a woman over a man for certain situations, for sure. I mean, you just hands down. I mean, you can't compare, and maybe I'm generalized, but you can't compare arrogance over finesse. And
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and women bring a lot of finesse, right? And it's like you said, you can tell from how you manage things, because you have to work on technique. You can tell maybe what someone else needs to work on, and you can find those micro adjustments in their own technique. And there's also like, as a guide, there's certain things that dudes just don't connect with. That there's some sort of emergency or something where, unless you're well practiced as a male, you can't really talk to ladies about. So a strong female leader is definitely outweighs often a strong male leader, I think, in the guiding space, for sure, in leadership space. So would I like to see more? Yeah. Does that mean that I think, I want to see more women than men? No, I want to see equal opportunity, obviously, and based on merit, not just merit in terms of like how much of a boat you can lift or whatever, or what your skill level's at, but moreover, so that merit in like, can you make decisions? Can you do your workload? Oh, that kind of thing. Oh, one person I didn't mention is Sabrina, skinny woman, but man, she carried a lot of stuff. And a great guy, great interpreter, like another person that, as I work with her, I look up to her to see how I can get better in terms of like what she brings to the table. I learned a lot. So, yeah, more the merrier, but I'd like to see more diversity overall, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, the new Canadian thing is a challenge for sure. There's just a lot of new folks in the country. Culturally, they're not necessarily connected with swimming. I've gotten myself in trouble with this concept in the past, where I've had students tell me that I'm profiling and that I'm being a racist, and it's not necessarily that I'm doing either one of those things. It's just that I can't necessarily, and this is from experience. So I worked as a lifeguard for like 10 years, and then while I was doing that, I was also a river guide, and one moved into another, and I've worked with all kinds of demographics, and it's just culturally, some folks just don't swim, not because they physiologically can't, it's because it's not in their upbringing. So it's really hard to bring those folks into the river world, and the best place to start, I think, is on a raft, obviously. But that's a whole nother discussion, maybe. Well, thanks for the chat, Kelsey.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for having me on. This is great.
Yeah. Hopefully we can do it again. Talk about something different other than ourselves.
Yeah, maybe pick your brain a little bit more about getting my own swiftwater instruction kind of path journey started. I don't know. Still something tossing around maybe for the future.
Well, yeah, like if you're available, come on out. You just need be really comfortable with the content, which you are, but then, part of the secret to instructing is like answering questions, right? So, what if that, or what if that, and then you have all these what ifs, and then you have to kind of like dance around it and give a meaningful answer that's a little bit more detailed than just it depends.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, look forward to having you out there for more Swiftwater courses. We're doing. I'm excited about one that I'm going to be posting. It's a Swiftwater responder, so it's just going to be like a research bridge for a first aid, and then a Swiftwater research at the same time. Yeah. So how it's going to work is there'll be 6 days. Hard to do less than that with all that content, but we'll base it out of some meadows and basically, try and do all our scenarios on the water, and then all the other stuff we have to do in a classroom. That's going to probably be the cook shack. I did a day in the cook shack. It worked really well for a research in the fall.
Cool. That sounds like a really cool program.
Yeah, looking forward to that for sure. Yeah. All right. Well, till next time, and thanks for coming on. And reach out anytime.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. This was awesome. I like talking about anything and everything on the water. So
I know, right? Yeah. Let's just we're just total river nerds.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about river stuff all day.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. We'll chat later.
Okay, sounds good.